and welcome back to Lyss Bri. We are together again. Brianna is home on Christmas break, winter break, all of the above. So we are filming some videos together, and recently we have actually both been studying some in the book of Hebrews. Bri said that her church has been doing some in Hebrews. I was doing some by myself in Hebrews.
I did in most of the semester, actually.
Yes.
We didn't even talk about it until we were like, what video should we do? And then we're like, let's do Hebrews. And we're like, it'll be a together video.
Both been studying that,
Perfect.
yes. So anyway, today's video, we just want to kind of give an overview of the main theme of Hebrews, some of the background, and, you know, just go, if you went through the whole book, this is one of the main themes that we would see throughout the whole book.
Yeah. And I think Hebrews is really interesting because out of all the New Testament books, it's the only one we don't have a designated author for.
Yes.
No one identifies himself as an author like Paul normally does, and it's not like historically known who the author is. So there's lots of speculations, lots of theories. I don't think we really can know, to be honest.
Right.
But it is interesting, like, there's so much truth and goodness in this book, and yet we don't even know who was inspired to write it. So
it's kind of amazing because then it just like completely just glorifies God.
Yeah.
You know, like we're not thinking, oh, Paul was such a smart author. Like we know all of the books are originally, they're inspired by God anyway. But that we don't know an author is just like it's completely from God.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat that way.
It's so cool.
Some people think it was written by Paul or maybe Luke or Barnabas. I even read somebody thought it was written by Barnabas.
Yeah.
But
There's tons of other people
we just
out there
don't
too.
know. Yeah. But it was written most likely in the 1st century, probably before 70 AD-ish. Near the end of the book, Timothy is mentioned. We know that he was alive during Paul's time, the apostles' time.
Yep.
But he was also younger, so it could be even later on in his life. But it was somewhere in the 1st century.
Yeah, and Hebrews was mostly written to Christians, and so I think that's why it's a lot, it's very doctrinally rich, but it's not as much salvation-based as, like, Romans is. Because Romans was written to, like, a mixed audience of saved and unsaved, Jews and Gentiles. And so Hebrews is written to the Christian, people who already profess Christ. And so it's basically just how good God is and how much greater God is than all these things.
Yes, which leads us to what we kind of together, kind of separate, we came up with what we think is the main theme of Hebrews throughout the book, starting in chapter 1 all the way through, is that Jesus is better. And that is something that you can just then fill in the blank. Like, Jesus is better
than
everything.
Yeah.
And throughout the book, we see so many ways that Jesus is higher than, you have a whole list, but angels and other things, and he's the best priest, the best sacrifice, all of these things. And all throughout the book, it's kind of lifting up Jesus and showing us how he is so much better than everything else and everyone else.
Yeah, and I think that's another cool part, because since it is written to Christians, especially like Jewish Christians, they would have this background. They would acknowledge the patriarchs. They would obviously still hold the law, and like, as you know, it was God's law, and so they still held it in a high standard. They held Moses, the patriarchs, even angels, because they're just so like otherworldly. The Jews actually really were fascinated by angels, and so Hebrews goes through a list of like, I wrote 5 things down, but it's like so many more things that Jesus is specifically better than, and how we see it. It's not just that he is, but then like why he is. And we see so much of how like his deity, because Hebrews 1, it talks about how Jesus is better than the angels. And so verse 5, it says, "To which of the angels did God ever say, 'You are my son, have I begotten you?'" And then verse 6, it says, "And when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, 'Let all God's angels worship him.'" And showing that clear difference between the angels weren't God's son. They weren't in that position of power or authority. And then yet when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the angels were worshiping him like immediately. So I think that's just a really cool connection, how much better Jesus is.
That's true. One of the main topics of this that really stuck out to me was that Jesus is the best high priest. And so many times, several different chapters, it talks about how the different high priests would have to make sacrifices, but then one sacrifice was never enough. Like it would have to continually make sacrifices for his own sins and the sins of the people. But Jesus came as our high priest. He made a sacrifice. The sacrifice was himself, and he only did it one time, and it covered sin for all time.
Yeah.
Like there was no other high priest that would be able to do this. And it's also neat that he didn't have to make sacrifice for his own sin because he was perfect. In Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14, it says, "Seeing then we have a high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin." So Jesus came, and he was perfect, but he still was tempted like we were. He still had all the struggles that we have. He still was in the flesh like we are, and yet he didn't give in to that. He was so much above that.
And so I think that's so cool, because if you think of the Old Testament, the high priest was it was the highest position in Jewish culture. And so they were the ones who could go into the Holy of Holies, make the sacrifice, see the mercy seat, and offers that blood directly as God intended it. But when Jesus came, he broke down that barrier. And so now we don't have that barrier of, that curtain and that separation between Jews and Gentiles and men and women. If you continue verse 16, it says, "Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we might receive mercy and find grace to find help in the time of need." And so we can come boldly to God's throne because Jesus was our high priest, and he gave us part of that office.
Yes, exactly. And I've already said it, but Jesus is better than the Old Testament sacrifices. He is higher in the complete fulfillment of that, so that we no longer have to make sacrifices. It was just complete. When he had fulfilled all of the prophecies and he was on the cross, he said, "It is finished." And that literally meant all of sin for all time is covered. Like there's nothing else that needs to be done for salvation. It's just finished.
Yeah, for sure. I think another thing I like in all of Hebrews, especially near the end of Hebrews, is how Jesus is the founder and perfecter of our faith. And we see it a lot in Hebrews 12. It says, "Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of God." And so we're familiar with that verse and how he not only is the high priest, but like he's the founder of our faith. We see it a lot throughout the whole book if we look closely, because even chapter 2, it talks about that Jesus is the founder of our salvation and how this was his plan since the beginning. And it's just so cool. Like he had this plan of redemption all along, and we see it in Hebrews. Like he's better than the priest, he's better than the law, he's better than Moses, and he was the original plan. And so it's just so cool to see how we see that fulfillment and depth of Jesus's character seen throughout Hebrews.
Yeah. And I think in chapter 12, what you just read and the verses surrounding it, I think once we get to chapters 12 and 13, it's kind of like a call to live different because of who Jesus is, in my opinion. It's like we see all about God and the sacrifice of Jesus, his son, and how we have complete forgiveness. And then in chapter 11, we see many examples of people who lived out the faith. And then it's like, now it is our turn. Yeah. It is your turn to live out the faith. to look to Jesus as the author, perfecter of our faith, and live different because of who he is, and get our strength from him who is better.
Yeah, for sure. And if we really see Jesus as better than insert whatever there, if we see Jesus as better, that will drastically change our lives, because we know like his word is worth following. We know we are to make disciples and to share that he is better. And that just changes so much of our life if we actually realize and understand how much better he actually is.
Yes, that is so true.
Actually, the Wild Christian Camp has made an amazing song. You guys should check out their music if you're not familiar with it. It's called Jesus is Better, and it's based a lot on Hebrews and just how much better he is. And so we're going to link it down below. It's a really encouraging song, and it's just so deep, full of who Jesus is.
Yep. So definitely check that out. It's a great song. That's kind of where we got this idea. Just reading through the book, it's like, wow, this is really the main theme. It's just showing us how much greater Jesus is. So I hope you see that as you study Hebrews, and I hope this video was an encouragement to you. We are going to be putting out another video or two on Hebrews coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. And thank you for watching.